So while we're talking about exercise, the next thing I want to talk about, because it's part of it, is play. And play is critical for kids of all ages, and I think play is critical for adults too. So how do we define play? The definition of play is self-chosen, self-directed activities with the freedom to quit at any time. So, organized soccer is not play. A structured art class, not play. It has to be self-chosen, self-directed, and a child needs to feel comfortable abandoning what they're doing at any time in favor of a different activity or distraction. Play has been described as a child's narrative, a child's way of forging through their lives, of exploring their world, of expressing their world. And it draws upon multiple areas of the brain and really, really helps developmentally. It helps kids to emotionally regulate. It helps teach them cause and effect. And the lessons from play are invaluable. Play can be alone. It can be with all sorts of people. Play can be inside. Play can be outside. It's a great idea if you're going to play with your child to think about choosing some games that teach things like self-regulation. So Simon Says, red light, green light, things like that. It's also a great idea to let your child scribble and draw and to free draw and free paint and things like that when you're giving them art supplies. Often you'll be shocked at what they choose to color or what they choose to remember. I don't often say that parents should apply pressure on their schools because I think in general our school systems do an amazing job at choosing what is and is not right for our children. But a lot of schools, because of pressure to fit in everything into the current curriculum and to meet the challenges of standardized testing regulations, have cut back on playtime, have cut back on recess, have cut back on free time in the classroom. And this is an area where parents should probably get involved. Children, especially elementary children, but middle school and high school children as well, need free time during the day. They need time for expression. They need time for play. And it's worth it for you to let your schools know the importance of that. So the first couple goals were pretty easy. There's lots of guidelines for them, but now we're getting into the really tough stuff. And I think if you talk to most parents, they'll tell you that dealing with their child's behaviors, especially negative behaviors, having to discipline their child is the hardest parenting challenge. And it's also the one that if you're questioning your confidence as a parent or you've not been through this before, you're a first-time parent, it really can start to affect everything about the way you parent and start to dip into all of those other areas, eating, sleeping, playtime. So let's talk a little bit about behavior. Discipline, the word discipline is derived from the Latin word to teach, which I think is important not because of the language lesson, but because if we think about that discipline is a way of teaching our child. It's a way of allowing our child to understand cause and effect, to understand the way that their actions affect other people. So we really need to approach discipline as a teacher. Corporal punishment, or things like spanking, does not work, and it actually can be associated with increased childhood aggression. To date, about 2/3 of states in the United States have outlawed corporal punishment in our schools. Not all of them. So that's a place where you definitely want to make sure that your school does not use corporal punishment, and there is no role for that at home as well. I think a discipline secret that perhaps other parents don't share with one another, and most of us have to figure out on our own, is that what works for one child may not work for another. So there's hundreds of discipline and parenting books out there. And I have my favorites, and maybe you do too. But what you need to know is that you may have to try different things. And this even means among siblings. And it's not important that you are consistent between children. What's important is that you're consistent for each child so that they understand what's expected of them and what the consequences are. It's great to find or to catch your child doing good things. That goes a long way towards changing their behaviors. Start sentences with, I love it when you. Catch them being good. Compliment them on all of the things that they've done that you think are on the right track. Because if you keep the focus on that, the child also will turn their focus to those things and move away from some of the negative behaviors. Fight the battles that matter. So that's another parenting secret that I think a lot of people maybe forget. If your teenager wants to drink a smoothie instead of eating an omelet for breakfast, great, at least they're eating breakfast. If your middle schooler says they want to get their exercise and then do their homework, and they prove that that order works for them, that's absolutely fine. We need to let kids in some way take control, take charge of their lives. After all, they do know themselves better than anyone. And so if they want to do something, as long as it's one that perhaps the outcome is something that both the child and you can live with, don't fight the battle. Let them have some control. Provide structure. So children need to know that they are living in a community where things are somewhat predictable, and that will help them with their behavior, especially when they're younger. Structure means planned dinner times, planned bedtimes, planned mornings that get them effectively and efficiently off to where they need to be. And that's sometimes very hard because, of course, our lives are ever changing and sometimes we have to be flexible. But in general, if you can provide some structure for kids, you'll find that makes a big difference in some of the negative behaviors. Enforce consequences. Always hard, but important, because if you don't, your kid will figure that out pretty quickly and not take behavior requests seriously. Model good behaviors. You're going to hear a lot of this kind of stuff. We heard it with eating. If you are kind and respectful to your elders, your children are likely to do the same. If you are not a procrastinator and come home and get your work done, your children are likely to do the same. They're watching us, and we have to make sure that we're good role models for them. It's also good to embrace some of the things that maybe you're not good at and let your child know that you're aware of that. Say, oh, I'm such a procrastinator. I wasted time and I didn't get this done and now I have to do it in a hurry and I got to do better next time. And I think it's great for kids to know that their parents aren't perfect as well. But it's a good thing to kind of acknowledge some of that in ourselves. Kids need your attention. More than half of the negative behaviors they do are for the purposes of getting your attention. So sometimes just taking a break from what you're doing and concentrating on your child for 10 minutes, whether it be reading a book, playing a game, going outside, will allow the child to appease that need for attention and correct their behaviors. Talk it out. Even the youngest child can talk about their feelings. Teach your child feelings words from the beginnings. I'm mad, I'm sad. It's very helpful. And then continue to use them even into their teen years. Say, how are you feeling today? What are you frustrated about? I can tell you're frustrated. Talk to your kids about how they're feeling. You'll see changes in behavior. Finally, because I know, especially as kids get older, one of the things that parents tear their hair out is sibling conflicts. Siblings that are constantly fighting, bickering, coming at each other. The most important thing is that you avoid taking sides in that situation. That you tell the children that they either need to separate or they need to work it out. You empower them to find the solution, but you never take a side between the two. Since behavior and electronics are very linked in multiple studies, this is a time where we should probably take a little break from talking about the basics and talk more about electronics, and parents are often kind of seeking that balance with electronics. I am not one of those doctors that says your kids should never watch TV or should never play video games, because that's obviously not practical in this day and age. Nor do I think teenagers should be completely social media illiterate, because that also is not practical. The important thing is that all of this is done in a way that's developmentally appropriate and in a way that's supervised, and that the kids have support for when they're struggling with these issues that come with electronics. The main benefit for a child under the age of 2 who's working with any type of electronic media, whether it be watching a TV show or playing a game on an iPad, if they're under age 2, the only benefit they're going to get it is if they're doing it with their parent or with an adult who can be reteaching the lesson as you go, pointing out important things. Educational programs such as Sesame Street, which are designed for ages 3 to 5, have been shown to improve literacy and social outcomes. They are absolutely fine for your child to watch and worthwhile for your child to watch. So that's one thing you don't need guilt about, is if your child is watching some TV shows like that. I also think it's important to know that TV can be a family bonding tool. Nothing beats a Friday night family movie night when you're all sitting there watching a movie together. And that should be embraced and planned and looked forward to. So TV can have wonderful uses in the family. I always tell parents to avoid e-readers. Kids spend so much time on screens, both in school and at home nowadays, that even though I know it's wonderful to be able to upload a book quickly or things like that, it's really good for both their eyes and their brain to actually read on paper. So e-readers are probably something that's fine for adults, but to be avoided for children. Content is crucial for all things: video games, television, social media. Content needs to be developmentally appropriate. Video games are easy because they come with the ratings, T for teen, E for everyone. Those should be followed. Movies also come with ratings. TV shows can be a little harder, and social media is really hard. So the important thing is that you know what your child is watching, you're aware of what they're looking at, and if they see something that perhaps is maybe a little bit beyond their developmental place, make sure you talk about it. Make sure you help them digest the content, help them understand it, answer any questions they have. And most of all, monitor what they're watching. And finally, no screens during meals and no screens 1 hour prior to bedtime. Mealtime, we should be eating, talking to each other. There's no role for screens at the dinner table. And 1 hour prior to bedtime is because there's lots of studies that show that the blue lights that screens emit stimulate our wakeful center of our brains and help to prevent easy